Nicola, are we ready to go live?
We are. Yeah, okay.
Okay, right. Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to Cabinet, our last Cabinet before the festive season really gets underway. Obviously we had to defer this due to the election. So there's a heavy and important agenda today. I think just reflecting on recent months, I know we've been extremely busy, and I think the country as a whole, the UK as a whole, has been in a difficult position. I think it doesn't matter which way people voted, at least we have now. It looks like we've got we'll have a bit of security for the future, at least where we can move forward as the UK and start focusing on all these important domestic agendas, which it's really fundamental to us in local government. So hopefully we can all get back to normal. I think most of us are sick of walking streets. I think that goes for any part of the year. We've all been glad to get that over with. Okay, so welcome. Apologies for absence. We have apologies from Sarah, who can't be with us because her daughter had to be in hospital today. She had to be with her. And so we'll go into, actually we haven't done introductions. Just for those who are watching in at home or will do, welcome to the meeting as well. Just to introduce ourselves quickly, I'm Peter Fox, leader of the council.
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Jane Pratt, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Neighbourhood Services.
Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance.
Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader.
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and One Life.
Penny Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Services, Safeguarding and Health.
Dimitri.
Dimitri Between, leader of the Labour Group.
Okay, well, and we'll welcome Councillor Sheila Woodhouse, Chairman of the Council as well, who's sitting in today. Welcome, and welcome to all officers. Officers, if you take part in debate, could you just introduce yourselves for the public? Thank you so much. Okay, so we will go into item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any at this point for elected members? No. If you find one on the way through, can you please declare it verbally and then fill in the appropriate performer? Okay. So we'll go then into the substantive parts of the agenda, and that's 3(1), and we'll start with the draft capital budget proposals. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And this is to outline the proposed capital budget for 2020-21 and the indicative capital budgets for the 3 years up to 23-24. And first to review whether the proposals within that draft capital budget are reasonable in the light of traditional liability levels and the usual confirmations in these reports that we reaffirm the principle that outside of the annual budget consideration, any new schemes can only be added to the programme if there's a strong business case in that they have to be self-financing, or the scheme is deemed to be a higher priority than something else that's already in it. We also note the forecast capital receipt activity and the prudence not to anticipate further significant additional receipts over this next 4-year window. We never know quite where we are with capital receipts. We can plan all you like, but there's so many external factors that can affect what we do. There is a specific here, 2.4, the Cabinet specifically approves the use of capital receipts totaling 1.416 million in respect of utilising a capitalisation directive, and we've taken quite a lot of use of that, particularly in the revenue budget this year. It's a very useful tool in enable us to bridge any funding gaps. And a bit of background: the Council's Tranche A Future Schools programme is coming to a successful conclusion. Officers are working through the options on that, and we're working with Welsh Government on the Tranche B programme now, which will look specifically at provision of a 3 to 19 school programme in Abergavenny and the works associated with that. There are a long list of backlog pressures on infrastructure, property, disability work, public rights of ways, that sort of thing. In addition to this, various schemes, proposals, One Life, the Tranche C, Future Schools, the fact that the council has declared a climate emergency, our desire to continue to do whatever we can to enhance our disability facility grant spending. There's a lot of work going on the household waste and recycling centre enhancement, and all of that can have capital consequences. And of course, the capital investment required to deliver revenue savings. IT reserve is something that is finite, to say the least, and like all other programmes, any additional schemes will either have to pay for themselves or displace other schemes in the programme. One of the things which has happened recently, which is making life a little bit more difficult, is that the Public Works Loans Board has increased its borrowing rates by 1%, and obviously that can have some pressure as we go forward in increasing the cost of borrowing over time. Although we do, as many people will know, always resist the temptation to borrow for specific projects. We tend to borrow when it's appropriate to borrow, and so we can exercise some control over that. So that's just the headlines on the report, Leader. There's an awful lot in this report, and it is going out to consultation.
Thank you, Phil, and thanks officers for bringing this together. As you say, it's going out for consultation. There's a huge agenda of works we're embarked on, and also the report identifies some of those huge pressures also in competing for capital funding as well, which is important for us to note. We see them every year. I think that one issue which I did raise and other colleague leaders raised with the Minister recently is that Public Loans Board increase in rate of 1%, because that's that is a burden which can get in the way of local authorities moving ahead with major schemes such as 21st Century Schools. And Minister was very very understanding of that situation. So I think there'll be dialogue with the Wales government going forward. I'm sure through either the Finance Forum, through the WLJ, to see how we don't end up having to put major capital projects on hold because of this sort of change. It's a fair revenue impact to us, isn't it? Yeah. So colleagues, obviously it's going out for consultation. It'll go through all of the select committees and we'll receive it back into full council in due course. Any points anybody wishes to make before I run through the recommendation? Richard?
Just to say, I think we can be really proud that even though we're a small local authority, we get the worst funding settlement of any council in the country, that we're delivering some really phenomenal first-rate 21st century schools. I was in Monmouth Comprehensive School last night for their annual awards ceremony, and they held it in the entrance area, which is it's almost like a theatre of learning where you can see around half the school in that entrance area, and there were pupils on the presentation stairs, and they were able to use that facility for their music and dance pieces, which broke up the presentation of the awards, and they were able to use that entire area. So you had music and dance going around. It was literally like being in a theatre, and I think that's a fantastic example of what we've been able to deliver, and I'm really proud that we've got that commitment that we want every pupil to be able to learn in that 21st century school environment. With the investment we're making in Chepstow, that the new schools we've delivered for Caldecott and Caldecott and Monmouth, and we're now progressing at pace with the proposal for our brand new school in Abergavenny. I think we can be really, really proud of that.
We had an interesting visit, didn't we, recently down to see a 3 to 19 school as well, which is another example of an impressive new school build. but I have to say, you know, the sorts of things we've been delivering and we've aspired to and delivered here are, you know, definitely
It's
something
phenomenal.
special. You know, our young people are actually, it's something extra special. There's no doubt about it. Great. Anybody else? Okay, right, let's just run through. Phil covered most of the recommendations as he introduced the report, so we'll just quickly go through them. So recommendations laid out in 2.1, the Cabinet reviews whether proposals within the draft 2021 capital budget are reasonable in light of the traditional liability levels, and that's identified in Appendix 1. I think there's further work will continue to be going on looking at those various pressures. 2.2, that the Cabinet reaffirms the principle that outside of the annual budget consideration that new schemes can only be added to the programme if the business case demonstrates that they are self-financing or the scheme is deemed a higher priority than a current scheme in the programme that displaces it. 2.3, that the Cabinet notes the forecast capital receipt activity and the prudence not to anticipate further significant additional receipts over the next 4-year window until the uncertainties identified in paragraph 4 have been resolved, and that the Cabinet specifically approves the use of capital reserves totaling 1.416 million in respect of utilising a capitalisation directive that will be referred to in the next report. 2.5, the Cabinet considers and reaffirms its agreement to the potential indicator supplied in Appendix 6 and its interpretation in Section 4 of the report. And finally, to subject to any changes volunteered above, that Cabinet issues its draft capital budget proposals for 2021 to 2023-24 for consultation purposes as set out and referred to in Appendix 2. We're happy to accept all those and move those. Sorry, yes.
Just before you do move the recommendations, it probably was worth just pulling out within this £82 million capital programme, there is a significant sum. It's hidden in the detail, but nevertheless, I think you'd want to highlight it, which is the provision of £400,000 to enable the Chepstow transportation study.
Quite right.
To move forward.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Pratt probably would want to highlight that, maybe talk to it briefly, just before you move the recommendations.
Yeah, that would be really, yeah, that's, Jane, did you want to come in on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting study that we're moving ahead with, and I'm really pleased that we are, because we've got horrendous problems in places like Chepstow with pollution especially, and, you know, stationary traffic creates 4 times the pollution that moving traffic. So I think this is going to be an incredibly important piece of work, and we're cracking ahead with it, and we're on stage 2 of it at the moment. So yeah, and I think also, you know, we'll have a very strong case to move this forward.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, well tagged too. We know we've got commitment from Wales Government into that, which is really welcome, and we're going to move it forward. And we've got to be, well, we are being extremely proactive, or working with our neighbouring authorities for them to contribute to this bigger. But it's going ahead. That piece of work is going ahead. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Okay, so the recommendations there, all happy to approve? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to the other side of the budget stuff, and that is the revenue proposals.
Yes, thanks, Leader, and this is the start of the process for the next budget round. The start of the consultation process, where this report goes out to all the various scrutiny committees. Lots and lots of public consultation this year, lots going out on social media. So everybody has got whatever opportunities they want to take. There will be an opportunity to engage with the budget process. So yeah, we're going out to consultation on that draft budget proposals until the 31st of January. And can I stress that anybody who wishes, either internally or externally, to make any proposals as to how we should incorporate their ideas in the budget process, we will need that information before the 31st or by the 31st of January, so that we can do the necessary reporting and checking on it to make sure that it complies. If people put forward things that are outside of that time frame, we may well incorporate them in a subsequent budget, but it will be too late for this one. So the other purpose, of course, is to get it into context with the 4-year medium-term financial plan. Amongst the recommendations, we point out that the draft budget proposals are predicated on a 1% increase in aggregate external finance, together with teachers' pay and pension increases fully funded by Welsh Government. That situation has changed, and I'll come to that in a minute. The Cabinet recognises the unavoidable pressures of some 9.7 million that need to be provided for within that budget, and we confirm the intention to fully fund all pay-related pressures insofar as they impact schools, and to accommodate significant demand pressures caused in particular by increasing numbers of looked after children and pupils with additional learning needs. In trying to deal with the pressures that have manifested themselves, at the moment, Council is proposing the Cabinet is proposing a council tax rise of 4.95%. That's 1% more than we had modelled on originally, but the pressures this year are so great that we're having to consider that additional 1% rise in council tax, and that still leaves a savings gap of 1.178 million to address. Chief officers continue with their teams to work very hard on seeing how that gap can be narrowed, and of course the provisional settlement that we had this week potentially can go some way to closing that gap. Although that settlement was at 3%, representations have been made to Welsh Government on behalf of ourselves and similar authorities to see whether or not any adjustments can be made to that in the way of a floor. But at the moment, we are looking at a 3% increase. But that did include the teachers' pay awards and everything, so it's not quite as straightforward as slapping another couple of million in there. It doesn't work out like that. The budget, as I say, proposes to continue to support the administration's priority. So all pay and pension related pressures, as I said, looking to the increase in demand on schools and the LEA for ALN, additional learning needs, the increase in demand placed on children's social services, particularly the demands of demographics with the ageing population and adults with disabilities. We face substantial challenges now and into the future, and we're trying to position ourselves to be able to cope with that as we go along. On those, some of those major items within that 9.7 million, pressures in adult and children's social care, 5.5 million, ALN pressures, 1.5 million, and there was that additional pressure with regards to pay and pension increases in schools. So the budget does assume a council tax rise of 4.95%, which for a Band D property would be rising it to 1,316 as far as the MCC part of that is, so it will be an additional £1.25 a week for anybody on a Band D property. So there's a considerable amount in this report, obviously, Leader, and it is going out for scrutiny both by members and the public. So I think at that stage I'll let it go out to that scrutiny.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Thanks for all you've been doing, coordinating along with officers, bringing these proposals forward. Thank you, officers, for I know it, we say every year, but I absolutely know how much of a humongous task it is to close this gap, because every year you take, as you know, you explore, or we take another option. That option's not available for the following year. There are very, very few options left to close gaps, and it is getting harder. I hope, and that we will see, and I'm perhaps an optimist, but we will perhaps see a slight move away from these difficult times as perhaps more money is spent in public services across England and consequential to Wales. We hope that will be the case, but it doesn't get away from the problems we have this year. I recognise that there has been a better settlement to local authorities in Wales than we had in the assumptions here, and as Phil said, that hopefully some of that better settlement for us will help us close that £1.2 million gap. But what clearly isn't happening through the distribution of funding, there is not a level playing field. I know it's difficult to challenge. So, well, no, it's not difficult. It's absolutely easy to challenge the fact that, you know, 3% this year is not a good position. It's not a good position when you compare it to a 4.3 average across Wales, which sees a 5.4 increase to our immediate neighbours, and that's twice as much as we're having almost. You know, the expectation of the government that in Monmouthshire we have to go out to get well over 30% of our income from our council taxpayers, nearly 40%. You're quite right, and that is not. It's just not fair. It's with a heavy heart 4.95. And I tell you now, I do not like the idea of a 4.95 council tax. I do not like the idea that we are challenging schools to find more. But in the face of the growing pressures in social services of 5.5 million, you know, and their ability in that service not to be able to close a huge part of that, quite understandably, and the fact that the formula isn't recognising the element of demographics which picks up ageing population, whereas a demographic like new children come in, it gets recognised in a formula. There is no formula for a county like Monmouthshire with an elderly population and a raising care costs to that, you know. And it was something, actually, I was at the WLJ Rural Forum on Monday where we were talking about this, because there's many authorities in a similar situation in rural authorities who feel that the formula again is still is flawed, and we are in the WLJ forum, because I can't get traction anywhere else. We are looking to explore out a deeper understanding of the formula, distribution formula, which can start altering some of this disparity, which is totally not fair, and we need to understand that better. And I know there's a quote in the Beacon this week saying that I sit on the committee which sets it. I don't sit on a committee, I sit on a forum which looks at the distribution subgroup formula who put it together. And when I challenge the formula there and ask for the formula to be looked at, or whenever I'm in the presence of other, certainly some of the South Wales leaders, there is a reticence for us to explore this out. In fairness to Alan Davis, the previous local government minister, and to Julie James, the current minister, she said if other council leaders, group leaders, want it, we will look at the formula. I want it, other group leaders won't do it because they will be disadvantaged, because it's inappropriate formula. It is not appropriate for today's needs, especially for an authority like ours and others like ours. So I cannot rely on that formula being adjusted by the people who will be significant losers. So, you know, we have to have, like-minded authorities who feel pressured in the same way, coming together to create the case for this. It cannot be right that we are seeing ourselves with 3% council tax, a 3% uplift, which is better than it's been before, we know that, but with minimal reserves it cannot be right that that situation is allowed to perpetuate, where we've seen authorities with a massive, or rather far bigger increases, stockpiling huge amount of reserves. How can that be fair? That just smacks of something which is, it smacks that the formula is no longer appropriate, because if we want to authorities like Monmouthshire to have a sustainable future, there needs to be parity in the funding and recognition of the pressures that we face in rural authorities, and that's where the WLJ Rural Forum will do that piece of work, so we can actually once and for all present a case which can actually demonstrate the inequality and unfairness of the current distribution formula. And I will continue making the case, but I need my other group leaders across the political parties across Wales to want to do that piece of work. And turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
Exactly.
And that's where I'm struggling to make some progress. And every voice which can be heard needs to say that, because I don't want to be in a position where we are having to level a council tax increase like we are suggesting in these proposals on our public. They shouldn't be having to pick up the fact that the Wales government aren't distributing the money fairly because they may want it to go somewhere else. That is not fair on our public. So, and I will keep on labouring that. But we are where we are, Cabinet, and we have this this situation where we have £9.7 million worth of pressures, £7 million worth of ways forward, and a gap to fill. But I challenge officers here as well that, you know, I don't want this council tax proposal at this level. I don't want to see the challenges put on schools and some other areas. So we need to do all we can over the coming months, and we hope the coming weeks, and we hope that Wales government will listen to our case that there should be a floor and a formula, and see some uplift to authorities like ours, so that we can actually start offsetting some of those real those pressures with some additionality. And because it's just not fair, and I think more and more people are starting to see it's so blatantly obvious that there's something wrong with that formula at the moment. So anyway, I've had my rant, but we will look forward to hearing what comes through the consultation process on all of the options here, and we will look forward to robust debate, I'm sure, in council in due course. Colleagues, I'm sure you're all willing to come in.
Yeah, well, first of all, I may endorse exactly what you've said, Leader. It is quite clear that something has to be done with the formula. This has been, for me personally, and I know for other members of Cabinet, has been the most difficult budget process, because we have had to face some really difficult decisions, and you've mentioned them: council tax, school budgets, and a number of other areas where we find it really difficult to bring these proposals forward. And if you consider the way that the Welsh Government has had money which has been passported from the Westminster Government, they have chosen, and we understand why, to put a lot of that money, most of that money, into the health service. But they must also recognise that the health service depends on social services in the same way. And so to not fund social services properly throughout Wales, and particularly in areas like Monmouthshire, where the heavy burden of social services because of our elderly population falls most heavily, is a very short-sighted view. 3% floor they've put in. Now, if we got a 4% floor, which would not cost Welsh Government very much because of the few number of councils they would have to put that in for, we wouldn't be sitting here with a gap still. It would be funded by that floor. And I think we should be pressing Welsh Government to increase that floor for this year, so that we in particular are not affected in the way that we are. We are unique in Monmouthshire, unfortunately, because every year since devolution, we have featured as the lowest funded council throughout Wales. Every year. No other council has been in the position of maintaining their position. We have, as the 22nd council in Wales, and we every year are funded by the lowest amount. At best, I would suggest that the formula is opaque. It is incredibly difficult to understand why it is as it is, and the efforts that we make to try and find out, and you have done a huge amount in that, lead us to nothing, because as you say, if the Welsh Government is going to say, well, we'll leave it up to councils to agree, well, of course they're not going to agree. Of course they're not. The Welsh Government needs to show a lead. It is the government. It has this decision in its to give, and it certainly should be making that decision. I do find it extraordinary when we are being affected as we are, when the Welsh Government itself increases its own administrative budget this year by 7%. How can that be right? They give themselves 7% increase this year, and yet the people who deliver the services, the essential services, are affected as we are. I think it's absolutely appalling. Mind you, of course, there are some local authorities that have actually done quite well this year. So I congratulate Vale of Glamorgan, for instance, who last year were 15th in the pecking order. They've now risen to something like 2nd, I think. Why? Well, I'm not quite sure. A cynic would say, well, look how the leadership has changed over the year. It was a Conservative-led authority, it's now a Labour-led authority, but that, of course, would be a cynic saying such things, so perhaps we needn't say too much about that. I am extremely frustrated about this settlement, and I think the time has come that there should be, if the Welsh Government won't look at it, then there should be an independent body looks to see if this is a fair settlement. Leader of the opposition raises his eyebrows because he knows what will come out of an independent look at it. So I'm very dissatisfied, and I particularly feel for those who are going to have to face a 4.95%. If we were to get more, then perhaps we could do something about lowering that level at the final settlement. Welsh Government, it's up to you to come forward and lift that that floor.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. Richard?
Yeah, I absolutely share the frustration that the leader and deputy leader have just conveyed. The increased pressures that local authorities across Wales are facing in terms of additional demands for additional learning needs, for social care, they are Wales-wide, and the fact that the pressures are effectively only being met in some councils rather than others is really unfair. I think that range of 3% to almost 5.5% is far too wide. You know, we have some neighbouring councils that are getting nearly 2.5% more than Monmouthshire, and for every pound that Monmouthshire receives from Welsh Government, we've got neighbouring councils that get £1.60 to spend on services, and that gap is getting wider and wider every year, and it's getting more and more difficult to be able to protect those services that our residents value. I think the formula really fails to recognise the additional challenges of delivering services in a rural area. When you think about the running costs of running 4 household waste and recycling centres, you know, some local authorities, I mean, you can fit Newport into Monmouthshire 4 or 5 times. Some local authorities are looking at having 1 sixth form in the middle of the local authority. We wouldn't be able to do that. We couldn't centralise services in that way, simply because of the rural geography of the county. We know there are other local authorities looking to centralise their leisure offer in a large rural authority like that. That's not something we can consider. When you think about the challenge of delivering household refuse collection in a rural area compared to a local authority where almost every property is in a residential street, you know, that is an additional cost that we have to face, and the formula doesn't seem to recognise those additional costs of delivering services in rural areas. I feel that as a local authority, we've done everything we can to protect frontline services, but how Welsh Government can justify putting some local authorities in a better position to be able to protect frontline services like education. We are great believers in equality of opportunity, and that is not equality of opportunity at all. You're not giving every child the opportunity to maximise their full potential if you're putting some local authorities in the position where it's extremely challenging to be able to protect the level of funding that goes into schools. It's grossly unfair, and I really think the Welsh Government needs to do something about it.
Yes, I just want to reiterate what's already been said, obviously, but just more, emphasise the fact that we are, our demography is different to everybody else, that we have more elderly people than any other county, and that the difficulty, for instance, of providing providing care in the rural areas is extremely hard, because we're just not finding the staff. We're having to pay agencies, we're having to get people in, and it's not right. So domiciliary care is a main factor with our concerns in this, and I just want Welsh Government to recognise that social services, especially in Monmouthshire, perhaps have more pressures than most other local authorities. And I think if they do that, then we should have a fairer settlement, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And I think this is partly because, I'm going to be a bit political now, I think throughout the UK, I think the National Health Service is a sexy title and social services is not. And I think it's about time it changed.
No, thank you, Penny. Jane?
Yes, I'd just like to say, the officers have done an incredible job really balancing this, and I'd like to thank you, our leader, for everything you do to try and improve the settlement that we get, because I know you've worked really hard and been the lone voice really trying to get it sorted out. But we're going to talk about waste shortly, and I mean, we care about every vulnerable person and everybody that's got, special needs in the area, and we're going to have more assisted collections. If we look at collecting waste, we're not going to not collect from a very long drive of an elderly person. We're going to go there and make sure we get their waste. So it's about time Welsh Government recognise the rurality of this area, but I think they need to wake up and smell the coffee, because we have seen what's happened in this general election, and the public have been engaged and they're questioning the policies of this Welsh Labour government. They're looking closely at it, and they're going to look closely at these settlements and what's happening, and they need to wake up and smell the coffee, because the public are engaged, and I think next time we could see the similar situation to what we've seen in North Wales happening down here.
No, thank you, Jane. I think I need to be very clear for the public at home, and hopefully the press are watching this as well. Let's be very clear. Wales Government had £600 million worth of consequential flowing through to them from additional commitments in UK, in England, and so that's £600 million is unhypothecated. That means that Wales Government can spend it however they wish. WLJ, for those who are watching at home, is the Welsh Local Government Association, the 22 councils coming together. We made a very, very, very strong case, and I've been part of making that case several opportunities, where we have identified that £254 million is needed in the local government family to address the identified pressures. Bear in mind there's 600 million available to Wales Government. They have passed on £184 million to local government to deliver all of its services. And we know that 177 million of that is workforce costs. So there's not much less to address the pressures in the many other areas. And what I was disappointed, and that's why I didn't conform to the WLJ press release, where when some of my colleagues, I have to say Labour colleagues, were greeting this as some fantastic settlement. Hang on, Wales Government were given the money to give to us, and they didn't give it to us. Okay, they've given us some, which looks better than previous, but they didn't give us what they could have given us. And that's before you add the distribution argument on the top of it.
So, you know, I'm not going to let Wales Government off the hook on this one, nor will other colleagues, and that's why the WLGA and the Rural Forum, like-minded councils in similar positions, are going to come together extremely firmly to challenge this current situation, because it isn't right. Any other Cabinet colleagues want to come in now before I move us to the recommendations? Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, at the risk of coming in late, and apologies for my late attendance. Just briefly, just to say, what sort of message is this sending out that's the most innovative and efficient council is getting the least rewarded? And I just think that's a terrible message to be sending out. And, you know, whilst we continue to strive to be that innovative council, we're getting no support from Welsh Government for that. But thank goodness for UK Government for the Innovate UK funding that we've had, that sort of funding stream that's allowing us to continue to be innovative and creative with the way that we support our citizens. So yeah, I just think it's a terrible message that's being sent out, and it certainly needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any, Peter, is there anything you want to add to from an officer perspective to the budget debate, or?
Not to the debate that's taking place. I just like to echo, I guess, that point of thanks that goes, I guess, to chief officer colleagues and obviously their DMTs and obviously all finance staff who have worked tirelessly in bringing these proposals to the fore.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, and thank you yourself as well for leading that massive piece of work. And I know how flat out you've all been, and you will continue to be, because as I reiterate those challenges we're putting back to you. You know, we don't like some of the things we got in here. We're consulting on them, and we hope we can find a way through to perhaps have a different perspective on those. But we'll see what the consultation brings forward and what might come out through further debates with Wales Government, because their budget is obviously in a consultative sort of position, I hope, at the moment anyway. Okay, so this is going out for consultation, and it will be going through all of the select committees, and is due back to us in council on March the 5th. So that's when it'll come back, and we'll be making our final recommendations with regard to that. So the recommendations there, I think I better take them all as it's such an important item. So recommendations, I'll just run through them individually. So 2.1, the Cabinet approves the release of the draft budget proposals for 2021 for consultation purposes. 2.2, the Cabinet approves the consultation period, including the opportunity to present alternative proposals that have been assessed for future generations and equality implications, and ends on the 31st of January 2020. 2.3, the Cabinet receives a verbal update at the meeting on the provisional settlement that Wales Government noting that the draft budget proposals are predicated on a 1% increase in aggregate external financing, together with teachers' pay and pension increases fully funded by Wales Government. 2.4, the Cabinet recognises unavoidable pressures of some 9.742 million that need to be provided for within the 2021 budget, and the Cabinet confirms its intention to fully fund all pay-related pressures insofar as they impact on schools, and to accommodate significant demand pressures caused in particular by increasing numbers of looked after children and pupils with additional learning needs. The Cabinet proposes a council tax rise of 4.95% for financial year 2021. And finally, the Cabinet recognises that the budget proposal remains unbalanced at this stage, and there is a remaining gap of 1.178 million to address. All in favour of those recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next item, and that is the Green Infrastructure Strategy. Richard John.
Thank you, Leader. One of the commitments in our corporate plan was to bring forward a strategy to protect and enhance our green infrastructure in the county. It's made up of our network of natural features: woodland, scrubland, grassland, wetlands, coastline, our green valleys, the rivers, including the Usk, the Wye and the Monnow, smaller watercourses, cemeteries, churchyards, parks and gardens, heritage sites, the Severn Estuary and the Gwent Levels. And I work in partnership with colleagues from Newport, Cardiff, Natural Resources Wales and the RSPB, sitting on the Gwent Levels Partnership Board, overseeing the protection of the Gwent Levels. The key objectives set out in this strategy are improving health and well-being, enhancing biodiversity and increasing the resilience of our ecosystems, strengthening the character and distinctiveness of Monmouthshire's landscape, increasing our resilience to climate change, and ensuring sustainable economic development. The link to these objectives are those set out in the corporate plan, the wellbeing plan, the active travel plan that we're going to be bringing forward, and the climate change emergency action plan. And this also includes the connectivity between our communities in terms of public rights of way, cycle paths and watercourses. The strategy responds to the challenges of ash dieback disease, which has already affected millions of trees in Wales, and it has been identified as a problem in Monmouthshire, although we have yet to fully quantify the impact that that's having on our woodland areas. Some of the objectives set out in the plan relate to securing more green infrastructure through development. This is projects such as the Caldicot Town Centre redevelopment, planting more trees and increasing the area of woodland, as well as protecting existing woodland, maintaining and enhancing biodiversity and making our ecosystems more resilient, and promoting sustainable land management and agricultural practices, including soil management and flood management. This document has been widely consulted upon and went through Stronger Communities Select Committee at the start of last month, and the committee was fully in support of the strategy.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Colette and Matthew. Matthew, is Colette? Is it Colette? No, not Colette. Sorry, I think Matthew. Yeah, you're definitely not Colette.
No, the only thing I'd like to what Councillor John has said is just to talk about where we go next with this. We've established a green infrastructure and tree asset working group, which is quite widely based across relevant services, and that will really be the core for taking the strategy forward and making sure that the elements in respect to delivering the climate community strategy in terms of actually tree planting and responding to ash dieback, etc., are done in a coordinated way, because obviously there's a danger there that they, the one hand would potentially taking trees down and on the other hand planting new trees, so that needs to be joined out. So I think that would be the only thing that I'd add. Yeah. And they continue to provide a framework as a sector for partnership bids and partnership actions such as leading levels.
Thank you, Matthew. I welcome the report. I mean, it's something dear to me, well, dear to all of us in Monmouthshire. We're blessed, aren't we, living in such a wonderful area with so many assets, as we call them here, and using those assets in the right way for the well-being of our community, but also protecting that environment is fundamental, because it's you can't replace it. You've got to use it and use it to the best we can, whilst protecting it. So welcome the strategy and the work that's gone in on it. Colleagues, Jane.
Yes, I thought the report was very well laid out. I thought it was easy to read and it was very clear and concise. And one thing we can be absolutely certain about is we're going to have much wetter winters and much hotter summers, and we can see that today. I just think it's very important to highlight the climate change on page 102, and at this point I will give everybody an update. Hazel Clapworthy's been working very hard to get the working group together. She's had a very good response, and we're now sort of putting that together, and we're going to be holding our first meeting in late January. So just to update everybody on that. But no, I think it's very well put together and an incredibly important piece of work for us. So I fully support it.
Anybody else in comment?
Yeah, just to endorse as well, the whole of this report is nothing that I don't agree with, and I think bringing this forward now is just the right time to do it as well. But it is important that as Matthew has said, that we take it forward. to be honest, I'm not all that keen on the word green infrastructure. You know, we're talking about our countryside, which is what we are known for in Monmouthshire, and it is so important that we always keep an eye on how we're moving forward, both in the way that we develop the built environment, as well as protect the green environment. It's absolutely essential as we move forward that we do that, and I do like the way that this is linked to all our other plans. It's in tune with them all, and perhaps it's an unfortunate day to bring it forward when we're talking so much about the budget, but this is vital importance to Monmouthshire, and thanks to officers for the work that's gone into bringing this forward. Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting, comprehensive report. The question I have is, how does this interrelate with national parks? Because about 16% of Monmouthshire is actually within the Brecon Beacons National Park. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of overlap, because obviously we're responsible for, despite areas being in the national park, we're still responsible for the entire public way network in the national park, although we delegate some of that responsibility to the National Park Authority and work in partnership with them. So there's an element of overlap, but we work with the national park. Some of the delivery on some of these aspects is more where they take a lead. Things like countryside, the wider countryside management role, we as a single purpose authority, we let them take a lead on that, but there is quite close work on those issues. And there's obvious overlap in terms of looking at landscape issues. So the landscape assessment elements go right across the whole county.
I hope we're going to send a copy of this report to each of our schools, so that the teachers there can convey some of this information to the children.
Yes, and part of what National Learning delivery is building on this sort of resource, to provide actual sort of learning curricular relevant learning activity.
Absolutely, I think that's a solid point. Dimitri, I know you haven't formally asked for any questions, but you indicated you would like to ask something on this.
Just a technical question on consultees. I noticed from the main paper there's no farming community hasn't been consulted, and then when I looked at the volume and it says there's an appendix of stakeholders, and I can't find the appendix to even check what stakeholders we're talking about.
I don't know where that is, but I can provide that.
Has the farming community been consulted? Given its green infrastructure?
Farming community would have been involved in respect of some of the consultations, things like the local access forum, which is farming community.
But this report,
who were consulted on this. There's certainly National Farmers Union of Wales involvement in some of the individual projects. I can't recall whether they were directly consulted on this, but it's not out of sync with the way in which agri-environmental support is going, which as you probably know is around the delivery of public goods effectively. And so the more we can identify what those public benefits potentially are, that helps landowners to make support for.
I take your point, but the farming community hasn't been consulted on this document, as local farming community hasn't been consulted. Thanks.
Only myself. Only myself. I'm the farmer.
The whole community, are you?
One little team dot on it. Anyway, yeah, no, that's a fair challenge. Okay, so let's. So the report is welcome. Can we just the recommendation is that Cabinet approves the green infrastructure strategy. All happy to do that, I'm sure. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Matthew. Can you thank Colette as well? Yeah. Okay, so next item moves us on to the Local Government Wales Act 1994 regulations. And Phil, I'm assuming that's yourself.
Yeah, I've got a minute. So yeah, thanks, Leader. The recommendations in here follow the traditional route in that the payments that are made to the police authority in respect of their precept from the council fund is to be paid by 12 monthly equal payments, and community council precepts were traditionally paid by 3 equal payments, so that's April, August and December. But recently 2 of the town and community councils have requested whether or not they could receive their precept payment at different stages where they've had unforeseen liabilities, and that's presented them with cash flow problems. So it was apparent when looking into this that the traditional arrangement might be something that we could ask them about, and if necessary make some amendments. So the town and community councils are being asked if they can tell us whether or not they want one payment or whatever the responses are. We'll have a look at it. But in the meantime, the recommendation is that we continue with the historic approach, but in the meantime see whether anybody's got any desire to change it.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Pretty straightforward. Anybody want to say anything on it? Okay, so we move the recommendations there into 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, which you just alluded to. Phil, all in favour of those? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to the first of some restructuring and waste reports. So the first one is the depots review. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. And we do have various waste and recycling recommendations to consider today. We will discuss each proposal separately, with me providing an overview of the area for discussion, and Francis will provide further context and pausing for questions per item. Depots are necessary to provide frontline services such as highways, waste, garages and salt storage. And as a new Cabinet member, I have had the opportunity to visit various sites. We are looking to commission a depot review that will look at the facilities at all sites. The review will identify ways to improve the services provided to our customers and enhance the welfare of staff. Options to develop an improved household waste and recycling centre at the Troy depot will be explored as part of this. Francis, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jane. The only point really for me is just to say that with support today, we will prioritise the commission of this work to look into the provision across the county, and we bring those back to members at the relevant points through that stage. Happy to take any questions on this report if you want to go into any of the detail, and Roger Hawkins has just joined us as well if you do have any technical questions. Thank you.
I can see, knowing the various depots as I do, and I can, lots of the comments in here resonate about, inappropriate, small, cramped, and, and there is, so I think this is something which, we need to commission that piece of work. I'm glad you're doing it, because it does need rationalising. We can make far better use of our assets if we do things in a different way around this, and it releases other opportunities as well, as you've identified with Troy. No, absolutely. Do you need to go into further detail on this one at all? Or
well, obviously very happy to answer any questions, but I think the report is very comprehensive.
So it is pretty well straightforward, and we need to commission that bit of work, and we'll receive that back. Will we, with some formal recommendations? I'll come out of Cabinet. When are you envisaging? What was the length of time we were looking to do this bit of work?
It depends on the length of the commission. Laura's spoken to consultants in the past couple of weeks, a company called Eunomia, to support us on doing that work. They're going to get back some prices on that work to us in the next couple of weeks, so we can commission them in the new year. I'm hoping that Welsh Government will also be able to support us in that work. So I expect, Leader, that work will take a couple of months, and then they'll bring it back to you by early spring.
Yeah, no, fine.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, anybody want to come in on this depot one? It is a straightforward piece of work, really. Okay. Well, I won't go through. I won't read, Jane, the whole because I think the essence of it's captured the recommendation, but basically going to commission that piece of work. But it absolutely needs doing. I'm sure Roger also would have agreed with that. He's been close to those depots over the years as well. So I think we'll be pleased to receive that back in due course. So the recommendations then, I'll take them on block in 212, 223. All in favour of that? Thank you very much. Let's move on then to the next one where we're talking about actual household recycling. Jane again.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is a report of two parts, so we will discuss part one, then take any questions and have a discussion, and then move on to part two. I would like to remind members that this year we declared a climate emergency. In light of this, we all need to focus on the things that everyone could and should be doing for our planet. Recycling everything that can be recycled is an excellent place to start. And some good initiatives are underway. For example, all the primary schools are now supplied with milk in glass bottles, which are supplied by Raglan Dairy, reducing the amount of plastic bottles. However, since Monmouthshire's recycling rate peaked in 2016 at 67%, there has been a slow and steady decline. And we are currently predicting a recycling rate of between 62.5 and 63.4% by the 31st of March 2020. At this level, we are likely to miss the statutory target of 64%, which is set by Welsh Government, placing us in the lower quartile in Wales, and we will be potentially facing a Welsh Government fine of up to £134,000. I encourage everyone to recycle more and work with us to become a high-performing county once again. Francis will now go through some more of the detail before we consider part two.
Thank you. With regards to the Future Generations Inequalities Impact Assessment that's been provided with this report, it's a combined assessment that covers both aspects. And picking up on a point that Jane made earlier with regards to providing assisted collections to those in need, whether that's because they're vulnerable adults, people who need additional assistance, I would like to make sure the Cabinet are aware that I think that impact assessment needs a little bit of updating to reflect that. The one that's provided with the papers today doesn't highlight what Jane just mentioned with regards to the services that we provide around assisted collections. So if it's okay with Cabinet when you're considering the recommendations in these two reports, could you take that into account, and I'll provide a revised version of that after the meeting is finished. Okay. It's important to note that work is underway to increase the recycling rates. And one of the things that we are aware of is that there's around 50% of waste in our current domestic black bags is actually recyclable in our curbside services. So if you think about the amount of waste that we've got, there's over 50% in there that is recyclable in our curbside services. And Welsh Government and RAP Cymru are working on a national recycling campaign that's going to be launched on the 23rd of March, and we're looking at how we can leverage all of the benefits of linking into that national campaign that's going to be across Wales. So within the report, it sets out in Appendix 1 proposals for a recycling and waste policy which will support this change campaign that we've set out in the report. Moving on then to garden waste. We are considering some changes to the garden waste service. In a rural county like Monmouthshire, we recognise that we've got very enthusiastic gardeners, and we recognise we need to provide and continue to provide a good service. It's highly regarded by our residents, and nearly 12,000 residents actually access that service every year. It costs us in the order of £630,000 per annum to run the service, but the income generated and what we're anticipating to generate from the service in this financial year is only £330,000. Now, that's not unusual. Councils subsidise garden waste collections, and that's commonplace. And it's often regarded as the only way that local authorities can achieve those statutory targets that we mentioned at the outset. We continually have to balance the potential of fines and those statutory targets, and also providing a service at an affordable price. So what we're asking Cabinet to consider today is undertaking a review of the service, the garden waste service. We recognise that a substantial amount of modelling is needed and needs to be done to work out the achievability of this, deliverability of this, and also understanding what level of subsidy is required to offer the service and remain at an affordable price. So subject to your consideration of this recommendation today, we report this back into the Strong Community Select Committee so that they can consider all of those options and propose to bring that back to Cabinet in the early new year. It's important that we bring that back to Cabinet next year because we do need to determine what fleet and vehicles we require for this service going forward. If I can just take us on then to trade waste services, I want to highlight a couple of key points on this. The Welsh Government is currently consulting on a significant change in trade waste legislation, and from April 2021 the legislation is looking to introduce compulsory trade waste recycling for all businesses. The legislation puts the onuses on businesses to recycle, and it needs to be noted the public sector will have the same responsibilities to recycle as private businesses. Once the legislation comes in, the current service that we offer as a trade waste service to businesses at the moment will be non-compliant, and we'll no longer be able to collect the trade waste recycling on our domestic recycling lorries. We've already started to work with RAP to provide us with support to look at alternative solutions, and we're already starting to enter into conversations to look to work with other companies to partner with us to provide a compliant service. It's not normal that we just sort of flag this up with Cabinet because it is quite an operational matter, but I thought it was important to highlight the changes today because this will impact upon the collections and disposal costs for businesses and organisations to recycle and separate their waste as is currently being proposed in the legislation. Finally, with regards to this report, I thought it was useful to just provide you an update on the polypropylene bag trial that we've been undertaking. So since the middle of November, we've rolled out a trial to around 2,000 households, and that trial is running for a minimum of 8 weeks. That trial will continue whilst we continue to gather data. Some of the initial feedback is that we are having issues with the capacity on the vehicles. It is taking us longer to collect in this way, but the public and public acceptance has been high, participation in the service remains high, and the number of service inquiries we are receiving is low. However, this is something we need to consider in the round. There are lots of factors that are play with this, so we will need to come back into Cabinet for a decision once we've done all of that data analysis and we've had feedback from the residents who've been using the service over that period of time. I'm more than happy to take questions at this stage on this part of the report.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Francis. Thanks, Jane, for going through that. There's there's some key things in this, and changing our recycling behaviour, and I say our because we're all parts of our community. There's a need for all of us, all residents in Monmouthshire, to make an effort, the same effort that we used to make when we had the grey bags, where you could be seen through. We were really good as a county at doing that, and we've let it slip because black bags, it's easy, convenient stuff can be chucked in and not seen, but I know there's a lot of food waste going in the black bags still, and lots of stuff which could be recycled. You said 50%. Now, look, I'm asking the community, look, hear this message. We need to do this. If we end up paying fines, that's money we could be using on other services, and we don't want to be doing that. And it's in our gift, every one of us, in our community's gift, to alter this outcome very, very quickly. So I absolutely support some of that educational, that approach to let's help people see this. It's easy to slip. We all get complacent at times, but we need to make a better effort on it. The one area which I'm a bit anxious, and I'm going to review perhaps the recommendation in a moment, on the the review of garden waste service, which is great. We need the review of garden waste for all the things you pointed out, but you know, considering the introduction of wheel bins, that's something which fills me with dread at the moment. I certainly wouldn't want to be signalling that I am or we are massively supportive of that option. I want to see what that review says and what consultation, you know, feedback comes on that before we were to go along the line of advocating for wheel bins. It may be that it's a brilliant outcome in some areas, but absolute disaster for other areas of the county. So I will suggest a slight amendment to that recommendation when we come to it, but absolutely see the need for the review of garden waste service. And it was interesting. I am twigged that we were subsidising that by twigged. That wasn't. Sorry about that. I didn't mean twig. I am twigged that we were. Yeah, you were all slow, aren't you, this morning? There was a 300k subsidy to the to that service to that degree, and the actual costs. The costs actually associated with that are massive, but it is valued. I know how much it's valued, so we do need to keep a good scheme going. Colleagues, do you want to come in? Yeah.
I'd just like to make a point really that I endorse everything you say, obviously, and we must all, you know, fully recycle. But it's kind of a bit of an irony that the higher the usage of non-recyclable stuff, or let me put it this way, that we in Monmouthshire are quite good at recycling, but we're also now good at not using plastics. So we haven't got that to recycle. For instance, look at schools, they're using milk bottles, not plastic bottles. That's a huge amount of plastic that went into recycling. We, you know, a lot of us are not using plastic packaging and we're using alternatives. So we are not recycling. So the numbers are coming down. So the more successful we are at cutting plastics out and other things, the higher the usage, the less recycling is done. And I think that must be remembered. It's not, I mean, I know about the waste bags and black bags, but that is one significant point. And I think it should be pointed out.
That's an interesting, because do we get credited with moving away from the use of plastic, like the milk bottle is a good example, and we're given so much allowance toward that? No, but it's a really strong point.
That is a good point.
Well, we've got to get this message out that people have to recycle. We've got loads of vehicles travelling around the county. How about advertising on the side of the vehicles? Unless you recycle, you're going to be paying more.
Yeah. Can I just come back on that point? Because we are actually going to be putting new livery on the sides of our trucks to actually forward this education programme, which is starting in the new year, which is combined with what I think national government will be doing, because you know, it's only right that we change as the environment changes. And what I didn't appreciate until I came into this cabinet job is that how the waste industry is changing rapidly. And even what we were doing a year ago, it's different now. And the Welsh Government are looking really for us to be achieving a 70% recycling rate. So we've got to keep that in the back of our minds. And that's really what we've got to be, you know, trying to achieve. So, you know, it really is only right that we change as the environment changes, and we need to adapt. And, you know, we've still got our residents firmly at the centre of everything we do, and making sure that we still offer them the best service we can. Yeah. But we have to do that in this environment of change.
Nice, yeah.
I have to say that I was shocked to learn that we were not in the lead in terms of recycling as we were a couple of years ago, and that we're down in the lower quartile is extraordinary, but you can't get away from the figures. And whilst I agree, Penny, with the points you were making, neither can we get away with the fact that within black bags, 50% of that is recyclable material. Now, we are in a climate emergency, and this is a quick win for citizens to actually, each one of us, to take an opportunity to help with our recycling. We can all do it. Every one of us should be doing it. And I would urge the comms unit to actually work on making this fact known right throughout the county, because I think it will shock a lot of people, because people have said to me, oh yeah, we're really good at recycling, aren't we? Well, unfortunately, no, we're not any longer.
It's interesting. There was the talking on with Dot Davis this morning on Radio Wales was talking about people phoning in about that was it with their views on being 100% waste free by 2050. That's what right. They're saying. 100% waste free. It's difficult to comprehend how you move to that, and helping listening to some of the people contributing. You know, it's a heck of a challenge. The educational bit is so big. I'm pleased we're advertising on the side of vehicles. Some I've wanted to see us doing for so much for so many parts of the organisation. Every bin lorry should have a message that we need to help, be it now waste, but whenever we need to articulate a message to our community, bin lorries and buses and any other vehicle is a perfect placard to take around and encourage people to, you know, it works. People have been doing it for years on other vehicles, but we haven't embraced that, and we could do a lot more with it. I hope
that's
it pays
just
off.
one aspect of a number of things that we're doing to improve the education.
Sorry, go on. Well, just one other thing. I myself, when I'm at home, I pick a piece of plastic up, maybe bubble wrap, and I think, is this recyclable or is it not? For half the time, I don't know.
It's not.
And I guess, well, I asked my wife, who is the fountain of knowledge on all these things, and she tells me it's not. But if she's not there, I'm never sure which bin to put it in. And I guess that's the same for an awful lot of our citizens. Maybe we need to be being more specific about what is recyclable and what isn't. And actually, if you go to other parts of the country, you'll find the rules change anyway.
It's interesting. That's a good point. I mean, we know that Christmas paper isn't recyclable, is it?
Well, actually, I'm an expert on that now after my visit. It is actually the depot that makes the paper, which I visited with the Prime Minister in Caerphilly. It's all water-based. They spent 9 million on this printing press, which is totally recyclable. And they're producing crackers that are made of recyclable materials and wooden toys instead of the plastic ones. So I think if people can avoid buying these plastic, and I think next year they won't be available, actually, these plastic things that are in the crackers. Right. But I think people need to think about everything that they use over Christmas and make sure that they use food up and, you know, reheat food and safely, and not to waste food, because so much is wasted.
So coming back to this question, is Christmas wrapping paper all recyclable now?
You bought it from Wales.
Some of it is.
But it's a really pertinent question.
Obviously not the glittery one, or the.
Somebody
most
told
of
me
it
that
is.
if
you wrap it into a ball, that's not
comes
actually
out
correct, because I asked that question.
Okay, so there are. I think that is I think that's a fair challenge, actually, because there are so many different levels of plastic packaging. You know, some are very lightweight, thin packaging. You know, like the bottom of a ham package, the black ones. You know, is that recyclable or isn't it?
Not the black.
Or are the ones which the very brittle plastic, which a donut might come in? Is that?
We're learning a lot about your eating habits here, Linda.
I understand that people. I do understand that people do eat donuts, and I have seen some of the packages.
What about? No, I'm asking.
Anyway, we won't go too far. I think what you've successfully outlined is that they're part of that educational plan needs to help us to help our recyclists, our citizens, to know how they can do it better, and that's what you're hoping to do. Francis, you want to come in on it? I'm sure.
You can see just from the debate, it can become very confusing, can't it, around what materials you can recycle, what you can't. It can be a postcode lottery depending upon where you live, what can be accepted. And one of the conversations I've been having with Laura and the team is around the usual suspects, and the campaign will be around the usual suspects. There's a lot of the usual stuff, that toast, bread, tea bags that people are putting in their black bag that can be recycled. You know, it's just starting out sometimes with the basics, and just recycling the basic usual stuff is a really good start. And what we're thinking about is a more comprehensive leaflet and information and door knocking campaign in the new year, to be able to educate people to answer some of the complex questions.
Yeah.
Because what we want is for the people who are recycling to recycle more and to recycle everything they possibly can, so that they know that they can do that confidently.
Yeah. No, thank you. Okay, we're
Can
not
I-
going to go into too many more
Can I just
individual
make a suggestion?
containers.
Just a suggestion. Very shortly, in due course, we'll be sending out council tax demands in an envelope, which is posted. How about sticking another piece of paper in there?
That's what we do.
Absolutely.
We
Good
do
idea.
that.
Good idea. Yeah, Richard?
Just briefly to just pick up on Penny's point, I thought was really important that the Welsh Government's targets are quite a blunt instrument in some ways, because they don't encourage anyone to reuse. They don't encourage anyone to avoid single-use plastics. Jane mentioned the move we've made away from single-use milk bottles in our schools. We used to get through 500,000 of these third of a pint plastic milk bottles a year. That's all that plastic used to go into recycling. We're effectively being penalised for not putting all that plastic into recycling anymore. That's absolutely ridiculous. We've made that sustainable move now to reusable glass bottles. So I really think Welsh Government need to have a think about how they encourage citizens and councils to reuse, to move away from single-use plastics and recycle. It's not just about recycling.
There could be some sort of credits for what you've done, which can sort of be offset against percentages or something. Sorry?
Yeah, and it's a similar point really. It's looking at what sort of initiatives that are coming forward that are going to impact on that. So deposit return schemes are being mooted, for example, but that's going to have a clear impact on the amount of plastics that we put forward to recycle. And similarly, today Welsh Government's announced their consultation into the circular economy. So it's kind of, I suppose it's a bit too soon to tell because we probably haven't digested what's in that consultation. But what has been announced alongside that is a £6.5 million fund for local authorities. And again, it's, have we made any representations? Probably we haven't had any indication yet as to where we might be able to access that fund and what we might be able to use that for.
Sorry, thanks. So on that point, Councillor Jones, we have received the application guidance. It came through yesterday, so we'll be looking at putting applications in for that funding. For example, we would like to open up a second reuse shop within 5 lanes, and we're going to consider that as part of the second report, and that would be perfect in terms of eligibility under the circular economy grant funding that's just been launched.
Can I just add one more point? I think we also need to be very mindful of this report that's coming out about trade waste and make sure that we, as you say in the report, protect our high streets. We've done a fantastic job in Monmouthshire of really creating vibrant high streets, but we need to make sure that, you know, our small independent shops are not badly affected by this trade waste. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move us to the recommendations and we get into the final waste report. So I'll just work through them. So I want to just amend 2.3 slightly. So 2.1 then is to approve the household curbside recycling and waste collection policy, which is at Appendix 1. 2.2 to approve the implementation of a change programme at the curbside to enhance and support positive recycling behaviour for all residents across the county. 2.3, as it's written there, is to commission a review of the garden and waste service and consider the introduction of wheeled bins from spring 2021. You'll hear what I just said, concerns around that, and I think we share. So I just want to alter that one to commission a review of the garden waste service. Okay.
Yeah.
And 2.4 to delegate the trade waste review to the chief officer in order to implement recommended services changes in consultation with the cabinet member. And 2.5 to take note of the polypropylene reusable bag trial update. Thanks for that. I look forward to seeing what the outcome finally is on that. Oh, okay, those are the recommendations and slightly amended. All in favour? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the final report of today. Jane.
Yeah, so this is Household Recycling Report Part 2. We manage a large volume of waste through our household waste and recycling centres, and this report sets out the measures that I agree are necessary in order to achieve the statutory recycling targets, minimise budget increases and provide sustainable services going forward. This year, interventions to reduce waste and increase recycling at sites has proven to be effective. The introduction of permits is one of the tools that has been used and is working. We are looking to build on the overwhelming success of the Llanffoes reuse shop. This shop is generating profit which we are investing into climate change projects. And we would like to open a second reuse shop at 5 Lanes in the south of the county. And we are exploring other options for Welsh Government funding for this, and we'll keep you updated on progress. And this report highlights a further set of interventions. Having visited our sites with officers and speaking to our contractor Viridor Waste Management, I understand the reasons and rationale for rationalising the service provision, which includes the closure of our worst performing site at Usk. Francis, could I ask you again to provide more detail with regards to the report?
Thank you. With regards to household waste recycling centres, we have a statutory duty to provide one of those facilities to dispose of bulky waste items. And if Cabinet agreed to proceed with the recommendations in the report today, I just want to highlight that that would mean that the county would have 3 sites within Monmouthshire and the curbside recycling services that we've already set out. But we also have partners such as homemakers who are available to collect bulky waste items from householders as well. In addition, the report sets out that we'll be introducing black bag sorting stations at the 3 sites to enable more waste to be separated when a resident and householder arrives at the site. These will increase education of the residents and also assist further to support people and change their behaviour. The proposals offer the potential to increase recycling considerably. Based on some of the modelling that the team have done, we could see an uplift in our recycling percentage by 9.5 percentile points, which would increase our overall recycling rate above the target that we've referred to today of 70%. And finally, I think it's also worth noting that subject to the discussion and consideration of the recommendations today, we need to progress with the procurement of our contract for the management of the household waste recycling centres and waste transfer station. The specification for that tender and contract needs to be defined based upon the service that we require. So we will go out to the market to re-tender that contract. Thank you very much, Leader, and to Councillor Pratt for allowing us to present this report and provide some of the detail today. And again, more than happy to take any questions of detail on this report if you wish.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks. Just absolutely go with what's identified in here, the separation, you know, I'm hoping perhaps our previous message will lead to that, you know, being not having to be so forefront at the centres, you know, because people will have already taken out, and we can start reverting to, you know, be more comfortable to just accept what comes. But I accept that. The one well, I absolutely accept the points we're making on Usk here. I've got some slight difficulty in at the moment that is a consultation in our budget process as well, the closure of Usk and the money's coming forward. It's not, isn't it?
No. There is a potential budget saving of £40,000 if it closes.
Oh, I see.
But
That's
it's not part of the budget process.
Ah, right. I see. Okay. Yeah. Right. But I just want, you know, I just was surprised then that there isn't a slight consultation around that to just to get a deeper understanding of how that was seen. But no, fair enough. No,
it has been to stronger communities, hasn't it? And obviously local councillors have had, elected members have had every opportunity to contribute.
Okay, yeah, no, fair enough. I thought it was highlighted in the budget. Sorry. Okay, so is there a further point the members want to make now on the recommendation in here? No, so okay, right. So the recommendations then, as are here, 2.1. To approve the introduction of further recycling separation by members of the public at household waste recycling centres. to approve the investment in a second reuse shop in 5 Lanes through the Welsh Government funding. We welcome that scheme of clearly working. 2.3 to rationalise the service provision, which includes the constant closure of Monmouthshire's worst performing site at Usk from 31st of March 2020 and introduce reduction of revised opening hours at the 3 other sites from the 1st of April 2021, and to commence procurement of the HWRC contract based on the service model. Are we all in favour of those recommendations? Okay, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's agenda. Thanks for quite a heavy agenda, but obviously we had to bring everything together today following the election. Can I thank you for all the work that's gone on through this last year? Officers, if you can take that back to your teams, you know, it's been a funny year. Every year is a little bit different, isn't it? Can I thank you for all of your efforts? Can I thank members for all of your efforts through the year? There's always challenges, there's always something to be working on and worrying about, and I thank you for your commitment as Cabinet colleagues here, and to opposition parties for all the parts you play in holding us to account and helping us develop the policies we bring up for decision in the council. So it just ends for me to end by just wishing you all a very happy Christmas, and we look forward to a really successful new year. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Cheers, Leader.